This video is going to be about Eucharist or communion. Is it just to remember Jesus' sacrifice, or is there something much more? Let's get straight into it. From looking at the scriptures, it becomes very clear that it is indeed just a symbolic act, and not pertaining to your salvation at all. The first reason is that the Last Supper was a symbolic meal commemorating the Exodus event where God delivered Israel from Egypt. The Israelites were not participating in Passover every year, thinking that they needed to do so that God's wrath wouldn't kill off their firstborns. There was a lamb to be sacrificed for the meal, but the lamb was not eaten for atonement. The meal was done as a remembrance of the original event so that future generations may learn about the Exodus when they ask what the tradition points to. Which is what it says about the Passover in Exodus 12, verses 24 to 27. You shall observe this rite as a statute for you and for your sons forever. And when you come to the land that the Lord will give you, as he has promised, you shall keep this service. And when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? You shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, for he passed over the houses of the people of Israel in Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians but spared their houses. And the people bowed their heads and worshipped. And that is exactly the idea of the Passover meal that Jesus had with his disciples. In Luke 22, verse 19, it says, And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Now let's take a look at Deuteronomy 16, verses 1 to 8. It says, Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. And you shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God, that the Lord will choose, to make his name dwell there. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in haste. That all the days of your life you may remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt. No leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory for 7 days, nor shall any of the flesh that you sacrifice on the evening of the first day remain all night until morning. You may not offer the Passover sacrifice within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, but at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell in it, there you shall offer the Passover sacrifice. In the evening at sunset, at the time you came out of Egypt. And you shall cook it and eat it at the place that the Lord your God will choose. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. For 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it. As you can probably see, there is a sacrifice for the Passover meal, but the whole meal is done as a remembrance of the day the Israelites were kept safe from God's wrath and escaping the bondage of the Egyptians. Also, notice how marking of the doorpost and lintel of the house is missing from the instructions in Deuteronomy 16 verses 1 to 8. We have to remember that in Deuteronomy, Moses was talking to the new generation who were either not adults yet during the original Exodus event, or people who were born after the events of the Exodus. So Moses was giving instructions to many new people on how to keep the Passover along with other traditions. In the original Exodus event, the painting of the blood on the doorpost and lintel was a crucial detail for staying safe from God's wrath. Yet, it is missing in Deuteronomy, which means that the function of protection is not present in the meals done in remembrance. Another reason why the Last Supper was symbolic is because it did not happen on the day in which the Passover was supposed to be held. That is because Jesus wouldn't be able to actually have the Passover with his disciples on the real Passover day. Thus, the Last Supper was not even a real Passover meal, which means that it was a symbolic meal of the Passover meal. And here's a very important detail. The bread which symbolizes Jesus' body was the lamb of the meal. But is that a literal sacrifice? No, it is because Jesus did not sacrifice himself yet at the time of the Last Supper. This is vital because if we go with the idea that the bread was literally the sacrificed lamb, which was not eaten for atonement anyways, then we would have to say that the cup was also literally the blood of the sacrifice, which would have made Jesus' death pointless. And not to mention that a literal sacrifice cannot precede the actual event. The bread cannot be the sacrifice body when the sacrifice had not yet occurred. Now, I'll get to the most powerful reason why the Last Supper was symbolic and not a literal sacrifice, nor a means of salvation. It is because the cup specifically was for the signing of the new covenant. Jesus' blood had multiple roles in the plans for humanity's salvation. While Jesus' blood had multiple roles, the cup that Jesus was talking about had a very specific role. He singled out the cup as the role of the covenantal signing. Jesus was clearly making a parallel to the ratification of the Old Covenant. Jesus says, "For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins," in verse 28 of Matthew chapter 26. This is a direct parallel with what Moses says when he was mediating the ratification of the Old Covenant in Exodus 24, verse 8. Verse 8 says, "And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." The splashing of the blood on the altar represented God's signature, and splashing of the blood on the representatives of humanity represented the signature of the humans. Now, Jesus knew he would not be able to make the announcements of the covenant after the sacrifice since he was playing the role of the mediator and he was going to be the sacrifice as well. Thus, Jesus at the Last Supper was showing that the blood that he was going to spill at his death was going to be the blood of the new covenant and that the signing would take place as soon as the sacrifice happened. And the important fact to understand is that Jesus signed for both God and humanity. Now, because the cup and the wine symbolize the signing of the new covenant, if communion or Eucharist had some sort of mysticism going on, the meaning behind it would be the signing of the new covenant, which would mean that every week people are signing the new covenant over and over again, which would be utterly ridiculous since a covenantal signing only needs to happen once and once only. Who signs a contract over and over again when the contract's duration is still not over? People just need to sign a contract once and that's it. In addition, I hope people understand that Jesus had to be the one to sign the new covenant on behalf of humanity and him only because he was, is, and will always be the only one that can actually fulfill the commitment and do the works necessary for our salvation. So, if you haven't put your full trust in Jesus to save you, please do so. So, let's remember Jesus instead of placing the bread and the wine in place of Jesus and his sacrifice. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.